Thomas Reed adjusted his wool coat collar against the biting December wind as he stepped out of the glass tower that housed his company's headquarters. At 58, he had built an empire from nothing, but lately the view from the top felt lonelier than ever. The city streets glowed with holiday lights, but Thomas barely noticed anymore. Success had cost him his marriage 5 years ago, and his daughter Rachel rarely called. He was heading to his car when he saw her. A small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, stood near the building entrance. She wore a thin pink jacket, clearly too small for her, and brown boots with worn soles. Her blonde hair was pulled back with a simple clip, and snowflakes gathered on her shoulders. She clutched a green backpack to her chest, and her eyes were red from crying. Thomas slowed his pace. Most people hurried past, but something made him stop. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. The girl looked up at him with those tear-filled eyes and whispered, "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." Thomas felt his heart tighten. "Where is your home, sweetheart?" "Maple Street," she said softly. "Number 42, but I walked here because Mommy works in the building next door, and I thought maybe she was still working." Thomas knew Maple Street. It was a 20-minute walk in good weather. In this snow with a child, it would take much longer. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said. "Emma Clark." "Emma, I'm Thomas." He said, "Let's find your mom together, okay?" He stood and offered his hand. Emma hesitated only a moment before taking it. Her small fingers were ice cold. Thomas immediately removed his scarf and wrapped it around her shoulders. They walked to the neighboring building, a modest office complex. The security guard recognized Emma immediately. "Emma, honey," the guard said with concern, "your mama isn't here. She called in sick this morning." Thomas saw fresh tears form in Emma's eyes. "She didn't come home," Emma repeated. "I waited all night. Mrs. Patterson from next door gave me breakfast, but she had to go to work. I thought if I found Mommy's work, I could find her." Thomas made a decision. "Emma, let's go to Maple Street. We'll check your home. Maybe your mom came back." They walked through the snowy streets. Thomas shortened his stride to match Emma's small steps. She told him about school, about her best friend Sophie, about how her mom worked 2 jobs since her dad left last year. "Mommy gets really tired," Emma said, "but she always makes me pancakes on Sundays. Yesterday was Sunday, but she said she had to work. She promised she'd be home by bedtime, but she never came." Thomas listened, feeling each word like a weight on his chest. How many nights had he missed with Rachel? How many promises had he broken chasing the next deal? They reached number 42, a small apartment building that had seen better days. Emma led him to the 2nd floor. She pulled a key from her backpack worn on a string around her neck. The apartment was cold. Thomas flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. "The electric goes off sometimes," Emma said matter-of-factly, as if this was normal. Thomas pulled out his phone, using its flashlight. The apartment was tiny but clean. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper ornaments clearly made by Emma. There were drawings on the refrigerator held by magnets. On the kitchen table was a note in a woman's handwriting. "Emma, baby mommy had to work late. There's soup in the pot. I love you to the moon. Back soon." But the date on the note was from yesterday morning. Thomas checked the bedroom. Empty. He checked the bathroom. Empty. His concern deepened. "Emma, does your mom have a phone?" "It got turned off last week," Emma said quietly. Thomas called the police. He explained the situation, gave them the address. While they waited, he found the soup Emma's mother had mentioned and heated it on the stove using a lighter he found in a drawer. Emma ate slowly, sitting at the small table. "Are you going to leave too?" she asked suddenly. Thomas looked at this brave little girl who had walked through the snow looking for her mother, who had spent the night alone, who was still holding herself together. "No, Emma," he said firmly. "I'm staying right here until we find your mom." 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Thomas explained everything again. One officer made phone calls while the other spoke gently with Emma. Then the officer's radio crackled. "We have a Sarah Clark at Mercy Hospital. Admitted last night. Collapsed at her 2nd job. She's been asking for her daughter." Relief flooded through Thomas. "Is she all right?" "Exhaustion and pneumonia. The officer said, "She's stable now." They drove to the hospital. Emma held Thomas's hand the entire way. When they reached Sarah Clark's room, Emma ran to her mother's bedside. "Mommy." Sarah Clark was only 32 but looked older, worn down by life. When she saw Emma, tears streamed down her face. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I felt dizzy at work, and then I woke up here. I was so worried about you." Thomas stood back, giving them space. But Sarah looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." Over the next hour, Thomas learned their story. Sarah's husband had left them with debt. She worked as a cleaner during the day and at a warehouse at night, trying to keep their heads above water. She had no family nearby, no safety net. Just fierce love for her daughter and determination to survive. Thomas made more phone calls. To his assistant, to his lawyer, to his accountant. By the time Sarah was released from the hospital 2 days later, Thomas had arranged several things. The back rent on their apartment paid. The utilities restored and paid ahead for 6 months. A job for Sarah in his company's facilities department, single shift, decent hours, with health insurance. A small trust fund for Emma's education. When Thomas visited them at their apartment on Christmas Eve, the lights were on. The heat was working. Emma had new winter clothes. Sarah tried to thank him but couldn't find the words. "You don't need to thank me," Thomas said. "You reminded me what matters." That evening, Thomas called his daughter Rachel. They talked for 2 hours. He apologized for the years he had prioritized everything else. She cried. He cried. They made plans for New Year's. Thomas still ran his company, but something had shifted. He started a foundation helping single parents. He mentored young people from difficult backgrounds. He volunteered at shelters. And every Sunday, he had dinner with Emma and Sarah. Sometimes Rachel joined them. Life had given Thomas everything he thought he wanted, but a little girl in the snow had shown him what he actually needed: connection, purpose, the simple, profound act of showing up for another human being. Years later, when Emma graduated from college with honors, Thomas sat in the audience. She gave a speech about her mother's strength and about the stranger who became family. "Success isn't what you accumulate," Emma said. "It's who you become and who you help along the way." Thomas looked at Sarah beside him, at Rachel on his other side of the life he had built not from ambition, but from compassion. The snow fell outside the auditorium windows, and Thomas Reed finally felt warm. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Your story might inspire someone else to reach out to someone in need. Remember, we all have the power to change a life. Sometimes it starts with simply stopping to ask, "Are you all right?" Read Triclawed can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.